Welcome back to another episode of No Shame with Shane. I'm your host, Shane Fordham, with all the shameless sports takes. Jumping right into it, A.J. Brown, after the Eagles and Panthers game, made some remarks about the play that he saw against North Carolina. Made a remark about the passing. Reporters asked him, what needs to be fixed, moving forward, and he said passing. Now, this does not concern me. A.J. Brown complaining about the way they move the ball through the air against the Panthers. This doesn't concern me. If anything, it's a good sign to me. It's a good sign to me because last year, if you look at the Eagles team and the temporary success that they had last season, before the collapse, it seemed like everybody was pretty complacent. Like, everybody was fine with just winning games. Even though a lot of those wins were ugly wins, similar to yesterday, everybody was cool with the fact that we were just winning. 9 games in, we're good. 11 games in, we're 10-1. Everybody was fine with the W's, no matter how the games were won, right? Similar to how the Chiefs are looking right now. They're winning games, but a lot of their wins have been ugly wins. They've been finding a way to win, but a lot of the wins have been ugly. With the Eagles last year, there were signs to be worried. There were a lot of holes in the defense. The offense was becoming very predictable, very one-dimensional. Whether you want to blame the coaching, whether you want to blame the players who were actually on the field, it was looking shaky. There weren't a lot of convincing wins, looking back last year overall in the season, where the collapse that the Eagles went through, it didn't come as a total surprise to everyone watching the games. This year, I'm seeing sort of an attitude in A.J. Brown that you could say the whole team should have had or could have had last year, during the run that the Eagles had, which, could have prevented the collapse. But what I'm seeing in A.J. Brown from these comments is that he's not just satisfied with a win over the Panthers. He's not just satisfied with the overall result. Because if you saw that game on Sunday, the Eagles did not play their best game, which, I'm not saying the Eagles should have blown out the Panthers, because you have to consider the fact that, the Panthers have really been a different football team since Andy Dalton took over the starting job for Bryce Young, which not only had an effect on the surrounding team, but clearly had an effect on Bryce Young with the way he's been playing these last few games, 3 or 4 games. But I'm seeing this attitude in A.J. Brown. It's a good attitude. He's not okay with, even though they got the win, he's not okay with 70 passing yards through the air. He's not okay with only 5 targets, less than 5 targets in a game, because he knows that type of play, 70 yards passing, only 1 touchdown through the air, he knows that type of play is not going to beat the Steelers next week at home. He knows that type of play isn't going to beat the Lions in the playoffs, as we finish the regular season. Now, you can't play great every week, right? The Eagles are still on a win streak. They're 11-2 now, or no, excuse me. Yeah, you can't play great every week. I understand that. I'm not saying the Eagles should have blown the Panthers out, but they obviously didn't play their best game. Jalen Hurts, 70 yards passing, 50 yards rushing. 70 yards passing isn't going to beat the Steelers next week. A.J. Brown knows that 70 yards passing isn't going to beat the Lions in the playoffs, in the NFC Championship game. So I'm seeing A.J. Brown. He's not just upset over this Panthers game, but he's more so looking down the line. A.J. Brown getting upset at this performance really shows just how high his expectations are for this offense, which rightfully so. His expectations should be high. I mean, this is one of the, if not the most talented offense in the entire NFL, with an MVP candidate that is leading the way, with a top 5 receiver one in A.J. Brown, a number 2 receiver who could really be a number 1 receiver on almost any other team. So I like this type of attitude from A.J. Brown, because if he's mad now, we need a mad, upset A.J. Brown against the Steelers, against a tough defense that we're going to be playing at home. So I like this attitude from A.J. Brown because it shows, one, how serious he's taking, how serious he's taking not just the overall result, but how they get there. Now, granted, the Panthers played good football on Sunday, especially Bryce Young. Made plays with his legs. He was accurate with his arm. He was moving the ball downfield consistently, finding Adam Thielen in tough spots, Leggett in tough spots, throwing through tight windows, sometimes through 3 different defenders, on one receiver. So the Panthers definitely played good football, but it was also a good game because the Eagles clearly weren't playing their best football. They didn't play terrible. It wasn't a bad game for the Eagles, but it wasn't good. It's not like what we've been seeing consistently for most of the season, especially through this win streak after the bye week. So I'm actually encouraged from what we're seeing from A.J. Brown, and I'm not concerned because I know the relationship between A.J. Brown and Jalen Hurts isn't going to be damaged, moving forward through the season. I mean, A.J. Brown, he's had several 100 receiving yard performances, 1 to 2 touchdown type of games throughout the season since he's been healthy. I'm not worried about one game against the Panthers where the Eagles weren't playing their best ball, still got the W, and A.J. Brown is really just voicing his concerns. I'm not concerned about that. It honestly makes me feel better about this game against the Steelers. With how big of a game this is already going to be, it makes me feel better about this game, knowing that A.J. Brown is upset, because we know how well A.J. Brown plays when he is upset. We know how well Jalen Hurts plays when he is upset. So I feel good. It's good to see that someone on this team isn't just satisfied with the win. Not saying that, celebrating the win, being happy with the win is a bad thing, but acknowledging the fact that the Eagles did not play their best game, especially offensively, acknowledging that they didn't play their best game, and wanting to improve for the next stretch of games that are going to be a little harder, just like, this coming Sunday with the Steelers, addressing that something needs to be fixed for next week. I'm not by any means saying take the ball out of Saquon Barkley's hands, keep feeding him the rock, but the Eagles still on their attacks down the field still need to be able to move the ball through the air down the field, because that's what helps open up the field for Saquon Barkley and vice versa. So I'm not concerned about these comments from A.J. Brown. I think this was really blown out of proportion in terms of, this whole dispute, with A.J. Brown and Jalen Hurts being on the outs. I'm not concerned about that. What I am concerned about is when veterans add fuel to the fire. I am concerned that a guy like Brandon Graham, who who knows how the game goes, who knows the sort of the sacredness that should be paired with the locker room. You know, one of the best Eagles to ever play the game. Like, I am concerned with what we heard from Brandon Graham. I mean, his comments were just so unnecessary. Like, it really made the entire situation worse. Like, why add fuel to the fire? Why? I mean, granted, I know AJ Brown's comments weren't appreciated, you know, but I mean, what Brandon Graham said, what BG said really just made it worse. And honestly, BG's comments concern me more than AJ Brown's comments. BG's comments honestly make this Steelers game this Sunday a must-win game. Not a must-win game in the sense that if the Eagles lose, their playoff hopes are shattered, and there'll be a round one exit, if they fall to the Steelers, everything's unraveling now. Not in that sense, but more so in a sense where if the Eagles lose to the Steelers, another team that is among the hottest teams in the NFL right now, and especially if it's not a particularly good passing game for the Eagles, so just like what we saw from them this past Sunday with the Panthers, that'll then add even more fuel to the fire, and I think lead to a bigger problem between AJ Brown and Jalen Hurts. I mean, clearly this isn't a Donovan McNabb TO type of situation where, they just can't get along. Their relationship is distracting the team from the overall goal. It's clearly not that. But I think that because of Brandon Graham's comments, and the extra attention that he brought to the situation, and which also brings negative comments to AJ Brown, AJ Brown catching more heat now because of the magnifying glass that Brandon Graham's comments provided the situation with an unnecessary magnifying glass. I do think that losing to the Steelers after this could sort of lead closer to a Donovan McNabb TO situation where we could start seeing problems in the future. Like, I think that if the Eagles were to lose now to the Steelers, this would definitely play a role in that, because Brandon Graham honestly made this more of a distraction than it needed to be. Because we've seen AJ Brown and Jalen Hurts kind of get into it on the sideline before, but I mean, that's nothing like what we saw. I mean, it's not, but I mean, seeing what we saw from AJ Brown and Jalen Hurts last year, their little spat that they got into last season, amidst the collapse, I think that was more of a constructive, we need to work forward from this type of thing. It was a progressive sort of not even argument, the progressive sort of dispute in heat of the moment, heat of the game. I mean, that's nothing like Stephon Diggs berating Josh Allen on the sideline in the middle of a playoff game. That's nothing like that. AJ Brown's comments didn't come from a place of selfishness. It came from a place of more so wanting to succeed, wanting the team to succeed. And the best way for the team to succeed is to get AJ Brown the ball. Obviously in a way that doesn't take away from Saquon, but the best way for the Eagles to succeed is by utilizing AJ Brown in the pass. Jalen Hurts, I mean, it seemed like he had trouble really seeing the field as much as he usually does against the Panthers. Part of that was, just the Panthers rising to the occasion. And then another part of that was just the overall Eagles team not playing well, not having a particularly good output on Sunday. But I do think Brandon Graham's comments, they kind of put it puts more pressure on this team to beat the Steelers next week or this week, this coming Sunday. It puts unnecessary pressure on the Eagles to now not only win, but to also show that these problems are fixed, that this issue is fixed, that the Eagles don't have a problem moving the ball down the field while also feeding Saquon Barkley. So, I mean, it's not a must win in the sense where if the Eagles lose to the Steelers at home, the Eagles' playoff hopes are done, or their Super Bowl hopes are done. Their Super Bowl chances are finished, are down to zero. It's more so a must-win game just to prove that this team is functional. That this issue between Jalen Hurts and AJ Brown won't become or isn't a distraction to the Eagles team and their overall goal, like how the relationship between Donovan McNabb and T.O. was a distraction for that Eagles team. That Eagles team that was a Super Bowl caliber team, obviously a playoff team. So I think that the Steelers win now on Sunday has become even more important than it was, 3 weeks ago, looking ahead to the schedule, 4 weeks ago, even at the beginning of the season, looking ahead to the schedule. The stakes have been raised unnecessarily. And it's even more disappointing that it came from a veteran, not even just a veteran, but one of the leaders, if not the leader on the team, in our Pro Bowl defensive end, and Brandon Graham. It sucks that, he's out for the season, that we won't have him on the field, for the rest of the season. Prayers to him, by the way, for his tricep issues. But what makes it even worse is that he's causing a distraction from the sideline. He's adding fuel he's adding gasoline to the fire, making this more of an issue than it had to be. But I also think that he knows that, obviously, which is why he sort of recanted on his statements. But I mean, it was just no part of that should have been appealing for him to say. Like, no part of those comments he should have thought would be the right thing to say on a platform like that. Especially with the point in the season where the Eagles are currently, one of the hottest teams in the NFL, on their way to really a potential Super Bowl this year, especially this certain week. I mean, the Steelers, the top 5 hottest teams in the NFL right now are the Eagles, Steelers, the Chiefs, Lions, Vikings. You want to throw the Ravens in there, you can. And the Bills. But the Eagles and the Steelers, no question, are among top 5, maybe even top 3 hottest teams in the NFL right now, especially with all of the talent that both teams have. This was one of the worst weeks. This was the worst week that this issue could have transpired. This was absolutely the worst week. Really, the toughest, just ahead of the toughest test that the Eagles have had to see all season. This was the worst possible time Brandon Graham could have elaborated on this statements. And it really just adds more pressure to the game coming up against the Steelers. But I do think that we will see a much more productive passing threat against Pittsburgh at the Link. It's AJ Brown. AJ Brown doesn't have quiet games 2 games in a row. He's not gonna have a quiet game 2 games in a row. Jalen Hurts definitely is not gonna have a quiet game through the air 2 games in a row. AJ Brown is gonna make some noise. Is gonna make some noise against the Steelers. That's honestly, in terms of on that front, it really makes me excited because we want an angry AJ Brown at this point in the season. And I do think that I think a positive that does come out of Brandon Graham's statement is that, with the extra attention that it has brought to this situation with AJ Brown's comments, I think it's going to piss AJ. I think it's pissing AJ Brown off to the fact that he wants to have a game against the Steelers. He has an increased motivation for this big game on Sunday. And he should be pissed off, rightfully so. He should definitely be pissed off that his veteran teammate is adding more fuel to the fire, making an unnecessary, making this more of a situation than it had to be. He should rightfully be pissed off, especially with those in the media attacking him, calling him a bad teammate, calling him a bad leader. He should rightfully be pissed off with everything that's going on right now. And that, as an Eagles fan, is something that we want to see. That is a positive that did come out of this situation, is that we have a pissed off AJ Brown right now heading into the playoffs. Not pissed off in a sense where, he out of a more of a selfish motivation where he just cares about his own production and not the overall results of the team, not trying to take away from the overall goal of the team. He's pissed off because he knows that his role on the team is a vital key to the overall success of the team. So I definitely think that is a positive, having a pissed off AJ Brown at this point in the season, because that means, it's having a pissed off AJ Brown in this sense is a positive. It's nothing but a positive as we sort of close out our schedule, having to play the Steelers, having to play the Commanders again, So this is going to be a movie to see. Grab your popcorn, grab your 3D glasses, because AJ Brown's about to put on a show. AJ Brown is about to put on a show. So it's going to be really, really fun and interesting to see how this offense looks on Sunday. Being able to not only dominate in the run game with Saquon Barkley, with Kenny Gainwell, Jalen Hurts off of the read options, but to see how aggressive they are in the pass game this week, how aggressive they are in getting the ball to AJ Brown, which should really be a mixed match no matter who is lined up across from him. This is going to be a game to see for the Eagles. A pissed off AJ Brown is just icing on the cake for us right now. And it's good that it's good that our receiver one is pissed off in this sense, because a lot of receiver ones would just get pissed off at their own production and not, where they're not concerned as much with the overall record of the game, with the overall result. He's pissed off for the right reasons. And I think that's what's important to look at, when looking at this Eagles team progressing through the season. He's pissed off for the right reasons, and he's coming from the right place and the right places emotionally. Has the right sort of motivation behind his passion. And I think that's what we're going to see as we head into this game on Sunday, as we finish the regular season, and as we progress into the playoffs. But that's all for this edition of No Shame with Shane. If you haven't already, be sure to like, follow, and subscribe to us on all of our social media platforms at No Shame with Shane. And I will be back later on with more shameless takes.